Most interactions on the internet today are simply client-server interactions over longer distances. But there is a rich set of applications waiting to be built which are not inherently client-server, which are peer-to-peer networks of resources. To open up the internet to that range of possibilities is what a distributed consensus engine is intended.
Computing has evolved from standalone computers to client-server computing. And now whatever could be leveraged within a client-server context has been done. And now the time has come for distributed computing. As a business owner, one should be aware of all this. Is like the new wave of new paradigm of doing computing.
If you set out to build a distributed application, any distributed application, including a blockchain, you will today, given the prominence the term has gained, look for a consensus mechanism upon which to base your design and implementation. A distributed coordination engine, a consensus implementation, the foundation for creating distributed applications with the same ease as you would for creating a conventional centralized application. Distributed computing will not be mainstream if the applications programmer has to worry about failure scenarios. We have to address that problem at the platform level, once and for all, with mathematical rigor, so the application programmer can focus on his business logic. Blockchain, the term came from the Bitcoin project. Bitcoin needed to solve the problem of achieving consensus in a completely trustless environment and invented the notion of blockchain by piecing together a lot of already well understood technologies.
If we just take the word apart, it is a chain of blocks. And in Bitcoin, each block contained transactions. For the most part, people were unaware of the importance of distributed consensus algorithm. It was only with the advent of cryptocurrencies, people realized, okay, consensus is really important. Consensus here simply means that we all see the same ledger. Cryptocurrency was invented so that transactions could take place peer-to-peer, people who are equals, without a centralized agency trying to mediate this transaction. So for business applications, you never want to have a chance of something going wrong. You would like to have a certainty that it is going to happen. When you go to a bank and you want to withdraw your own money, and there is no game you want to play here. It's just like I said, this is my money, I would like to withdraw it. And that should be absolute certainty that you can have access to your money.
If you have the luxury of being able to depend on trust, that allows you to use more robust consensus mechanisms. Now take that away and you now find yourself inventing a game and crafting the incentive system around the game such that the participants are incented to conform to the game and somehow in doing so achieve consensus. Now, participants being untrusted humans in this case will try to game the game, if you will, and constantly look for ways to cheat. And you are counting on having crafted these incentives to dissuade the cheating. In other words, to convince them that conforming to the expected behavior of the game is more rewarding for them than it is to cheat. Among other things, You cannot make it very inexpensive for them to extend the blockchain, because if you did, somebody will be incented to just spam the blockchain. You have to create a friction, if you will, a cost to adding to the blockchain. And that cost becomes your regulatory mechanism. It's the balance between that cost and the reward that drives people to do what you wish they would do in the context of that blockchain.
So the idea of proof of anything, proof of work or proof of stake, or all these mechanisms were invented to prevent people from appending pages to this ledger in an arbitrary fashion.
You are deliberately putting on the brakes here to dissuade high transaction rates in a public blockchain.
Trust actually can be thought of like how it has evolved within society into three different phases, where the trust used to be completely local and it was confined to communities, and that has gone from to a centralized trust, where there is an aggregation of trust into this one or two institutions, to a point of disillusionment because of corruption and scandals within these centralized institutions, which is moving towards a decentralized trust. That was one of the primary drivers for the invention of Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes to the other extreme of removing completely all trust. But the question is whether that is viable or not remains to be seen. So it's similar to how trust has evolved in three different forms, like from local to centralized to distributed. I see a complete parallel within the computing world, where you have standalone computers, network computers, but client-server model, and from the client-server model to distributed computing and peer-to-peer computing. If you think of like a continuum, on one hand you have centralized institutions where you place 100% trust, and on the other hand you have cryptocurrencies where they're completely trustless. And so somewhere in between you could have a permissioned world where they're semi-trusted.
When you're in a game theoretic world, you are essentially in the Wild West. You are counting on others not wanting to or trying to or being able to twist or warp the game in a manner that corrupts the blockchain. So why would you choose to live in that Wild West when you have the ability to live in a more orderly environment founded on trust, and which allows you to operate with to execute your transactions with higher throughput than you can in a game theoretic environment? The key advantage of being in a permissioned environment is that you have the luxury of using algorithmic consensus. Algorithmic consensus comes with a degree of certainty that game theoretic consensus cannot provide. It cannot be gamed, it is an algorithm. If you need to craft a distributed system to be operated in an environment of trust, you will find yourself looking for a consensus algorithm simply because working without one is a recipe for failure. Now, your application is going to be only as correct, as good, as reliable, as performant as that consensus algorithm allows you to be. Any problem with the consensus algorithm is a problem for whatever you are building. If it's not correct, your application will not behave correctly. Your blockchain will not behave correctly. You cannot take that correctness for granted. You need all the trust you can muster in the algorithm itself, which means you need to look for academic rigor backing the algorithm that you've chosen for your critical distributed application. Algorithmic consensus is recognized to be a very hard problem. It behooves us, given the importance of this element of a blockchain, to be as mathematically rigorous as we can. WANDisco's distributed consensus engine is called DCONE, stands for Distributed Consensus Engine. It represents the sum total of our experience with distributed applications from 2005 to this day. Applications built on this platform have been deployed at very grand scales, over 35 geographically dispersed locations, for example, and have been operating flawlessly for years, processing millions of transactions. We have just learned to count on the engine as a rock-solid foundation for our distributed application.
DCONE is built on Paxos, which passed the test of academic rigor and is considered the gold standard among consensus algorithms. We have recently demonstrated that non-trivial applications such as gold exchange can be built fairly easily once we have access to this consensus mechanism. And these applications that we have demonstrated are highly scalable and they are highly available. Given all the strengths of this consensus engine, and you can take it and innovate it and put it into your own business, come up with novel applications. So many of them that are out there either look for like open source, half-baked implementations that have not been tested. Now, you wouldn't want to put your financial applications that are worth multi-million-dollar businesses on top of these consensus mechanisms. There is now competitive pressure that everybody faces. In that sense, if you don't do it, someone else will do it. And the customers and clients are demanding things that are cheaper and faster. If you don't innovate, and you will be left behind. So the permissioned blockchains give you a new way of doing business, and they will not go away.
That caveman who invented the wheel could not have anticipated the motorcycle. We're onto something fundamental. We have no idea how far that can be taken.